everybody. Walter Crosby with Helix Sales Development, your host of Sales and Cigars. Today's episode, my guest is Ben Elbert. Ben's a marketing guy, a podcast guy, and we talk about how he was able to take a big problem in his life and turn it around within a year. But he shares the fact that it wasn't easy, that there was bumps in the road, but he stuck to his plan. So he's got this entrepreneurial mindset. We talk a lot about the discipline and what we do in the morning to get ourselves ready before we go into the inbox and get ourselves all pissed off. Right. So we talk about that part, and we talk about mindset as it relates to networking. And there's some really interesting tips and a system that he shares that will help whether you're a salesperson or an entrepreneur, even a sales manager. These are all things that you can use with your team. So go grab a cocktail, grab a cigar, strap in for another fun episode of Sales and Cigars. Thanks. So, Ben, I appreciate you taking some time out of your schedule to jump on the podcast and have a conversation.
I appreciate you having me, Walter. This is going to be fun.
I know you're feeling a little under the weather, so
The Louis Armstrong voice today.
yeah, we'll just get you a trumpet and you'll be.
Go on.
Um, so I've been looking forward to this because you've got a different approach to networking, and you've got some ideas around podcasting, which I'm a little selfish about. This will be fun for Walter as well. So let's start off with: is there a book that you reread or that you gift a lot in a business context?
So my fingers are crossed that someone's already mentioned this. But my go-to is The Miracle Morning by Hal Elrod. It's not a business book. Simply put, it's a habit book. And giving the whole way, I'll give the book away for free here for a moment. He creates an acronym called SAVERS: silence, affirmation, visualization, exercise, reading, scribing. Silence, affirmation, visualization, exercise, reading, and scribing. That's my morning. I've been doing this, my version of the Miracle Morning, for almost a decade now. And no, it's not a business book, but when I win the morning,
Mm-hmm.
when I'm focused, I create an attitude of winning, and it helps me when I do show up to sales calls, because I already know what a winner looks like.
But that discipline in the morning, whatever that is, that works for
Mm.
that individual, um, I mean, that's what it becomes, a discipline, right? It becomes a habit that constantly you're constantly doing, and it's just how it's how you get up. Is that fair? How you get up to do it?
I mean, yeah, I'm not perfect, but when you roll off and you're picking up your phone and you're scrolling in emails and something triggers you and then your blood pressure goes up, I'm over here reading something. I'm relaxing. I'm doing something creative in my journal well before I open up that phone. So if that email comes in and maybe triggers me a little bit, I already feel comfortable.
Yeah.
I already feel confident.
So it's like we don't go in and fuck up our day by looking at the inbox, right? It's just do the thing that's going to matter to us, and push that off as long as possible. That's great advice.
I know it's Walter, I know it's not our main topic today, but I think that's one big issue in sales is people forget to control the controllables, and they're so focused on their region, they're so focused on if they're making a sale or if the person emailed them back. And if they had habits and routines and a way of doing business, they wouldn't be worried about those kind of things because they can control their input. They can't always control exactly what's going to come back to them.
I mean, it's a great point because I mean that's why we have processes. That's why we have the routines, and it's being able to stay focused on what we control. And in sales, that's our attitude, our behaviors, and the activities,
Mm.
right? And it's is it a numbers game to a certain extent, but are we doing it effectively? Are we saying the right things? Are we talking to the right people? Are we, or it's those things that we can control. So, winning the day starts with winning your mindset and getting yourself prepared so that you don't psych yourself out. Because to me, I was taught a long time ago, and I always lose this. Um, but I used to have these when I had my own bathroom mirror and I didn't have to share it with a spouse. I could have these little post-its on the mirror that ask the questions that I wanted to ask myself, because our
Mm-hmm.
brain works. If we ask ourselves a shitty question, it'll go find the shitty answer. But if we ask a powerful question that's going to get us to think about how we get something done, it'll go figure that out too. um, and it's really like, why do I have to go do this is a terrible question, to get us started. So that's a great point. Great point.
We could talk about this all day, Walter.
I mean, we really could, because mindset is really what is the biggest component of being successful in sales, right? That idea of next is part of it. The idea of being, I'm controlling what I can control. I'm talking to the right people. That I have enough. I have enough in my pipeline that I'm not beholden to any one of these crazy buyers. I'm not required to close every one of these deals because I have enough in there. It's the pressure we apply to ourselves. So
Mm.
I love it. Um, so let's talk a little bit about. I mean, we could go a lot of different directions, but let's talk a little bit about your journey, how you got to where you are. It's usually a fun story in there someplace.
Sure. I'm an accidental entrepreneur. It wasn't glorified. I wanted to be the next Michael Jordan when I was younger. I didn't think I'd be in business. And no Bezos on the wall, no Elon Musk or Brene Brown or Oprah. Um, got into marketing because I loved music. I was the promoter at a very young age. Way back in the day, I was setting up MySpace pages, then Facebook pages, SoundCloud accounts, then building websites. And what I did at my day job was I worked my way up into a marketing company to a sales executive for a corporate marketing firm. And I had just started in my new role 3 months before the pandemic. So I'm
Fresh.
just getting my things going. Pandemic, uh, last one in, first one out. I
Mm-hmm.
got let go. Music Ben was broke, unemployed, had a music podcast, and I needed to change because honestly, man, I started applying for jobs and no one was hiring at the time. So I said, I understand marketing, I understand sales. Why don't I put my chips on me for once?
Hmm.
Not the company, not anybody else. Let's put my chips on myself
Love
and
it.
see what we can do here. Started a marketing firm kind of on a whim, applied some marketing strategies, some sales strategies, moved from a music podcast to a business podcast because Business Ben's now an entrepreneur, was able to build out my marketing firm and replace my sales executive income in a year.
All during the pandemic.
All during the pandemic. Now, I guess I give myself a little bit of credit. There was about 4 months of pulling my hair out, wondering what was going to happen next. But
Sure.
once I started moving, dude, once you start getting momentum, again, replace the income in a year. And that's kind of like the clickbait, like did it in 1 year. But my entire life, all the training, all the clients, all the failures were in preparation for that. My music podcast was in preparation for my business podcast. So one thing I know a lot of your listeners probably are running 10, 20, 30 million dollar businesses. Some of them might just be getting started or maybe just had a commission only job and they're kind of at the lower of the ladder. No matter where you are, if you're getting the knowledge, the attitude, the skills, and you're developing good habits, you're preparing yourself for that opportunity that for me just happened to happen during the pandemic.
It's being ready. It's sort of like when you watch a boxing match, and I don't care, middleweight, heavyweight, whatever. That guy just made $45 million for 6 minutes in a fight, and it's like, no.
Pretending to fight Jake Paul.
Yeah, I'm going back to I'm going back to real
I'm just
fights,
messing.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, but if you think about it, it's the same. It's the same thing.
Yeah.
That fight was prepared for every minute he spent in the ring.
Right.
Practicing. It spent all the time he spent running. All of the hard work is is what informs you. And if you're doing the work, the opportunities will present themselves. It might not look like an opportunity at the time. It might suck, as you said, for like 2 or 3 months. But I love the idea of putting some chips on yourself and taking that bet. Most people don't have the balls to go do that. Um, and I
You
think,
know,
it doesn't make you a bad person. Having that risk. I used to have a button. I'm old, right? So when I was in college, you wore these big coats and you had little buttons on the lapels of your coat, like overcoats in the wintertime. And mine said, if you're not living on the edge, you're taking up too much space, right? And it was sort of a mindset thing that I'm going to take risks.
mm,
It's not fun to just be to take the corporate safe job because it's not safe as we know now. So you put the chips on you. You took the bet. You made the progress that you needed to make in a year to make it work. Um, I mean, it's truly the entrepreneurial dream. There were hiccups and bumps in the
oh,
road,
a trillion of them.
but you persevered.
You know what's funny about the chip analogy? I've never even thought about this aspect to it. If you put your chips on yourself, there's a higher probability that someone else will put their chips on you as well. Any professional, I personally, people say I picked myself up from my bootstraps and through resilience and grind. I'm like, nah, everybody accomplishes stuff with help from others. You didn't make the bootstraps, you didn't make the boots, you didn't build all your products. Maybe you did, but someone's got to purchase the product. So if I'm putting my chips on myself, that's a level of certainty that I'm willing to put my money where my mouth is. Other people want to put their chips there too. If you got a board and there's no chips on that one spot, people are going to wonder why he's not even willing to put chips on himself and no one wants to put chips on him. Why would I buy from him? You want to buy from someone that has momentum. And if you don't have momentum, you put the chips on yourself first. And then everyone's like, oh, wow, I actually want to put my chips here too.
It creates confidence.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I think there's a piece here that we can always talk about on social media. There's all these gurus that don't have this part of the conversation. I did it in a year. It was a piece of cake, right? Is how they present it, and it did it in a year, but it was hard, right? But I was willing to learn from the things that didn't work and pivot and make those decisions quickly. I mean, that's part of the deal to being an entrepreneur and to keep placing those bets and keep growing as an individual. Um, and I think that's a component that we don't talk about enough. That a mistake is not a failure, or failure is not a failure. It's what did we do wrong? What could we do better? And learning from that. I mean, it's somewhat cliche, but it's really true. Um, you know, I make more mistakes than most people because I'm trying different things, and some of them are you got to make reasonable bets.
Mm.
You don't bet the house on the red or the black, right? You got to be smart about your bets. But when you try something and it works a little bit, then you try a little bit more, and you keep dialing that in. Eventually you get someplace where it's where it's success, like the Alex Hermosi's of the world. He freely talks about how many mistakes he made early on.
Mm-hmm.
But the story is similar to yours, is that you persevered through those troubles and those bumps. So,
This is like first grade science. You create a hypothesis, you test the hypothesis, you come to a conclusion. You didn't fail if the hypothesis was wrong. It's not a mistake. What happens is you form a new hypothesis and then you change some variables. We only fail when we stop working on finding the correct hypothesis in this scenario. Like you're not failing, you're not making mistakes, you're testing assumptions. Science is 99% testing assumptions. And then when you get it right, the beauty about sales is it's really not rocket science. You have a team member, you have a mentor, you have a system that'll help you get it right. You don't have to spend all your time getting nosebleeds testing assumptions. You follow a system, and then once you master that system, you learn how to iterate. But it's just science. We learned this stuff in grade school. It's not rocket science at all. It's grade school science actually.
I mean, if it was rocket science, I wouldn't be successful at it. I would never have
Me
gotten,
neither.
I would never
Yeah.
got off the ground, because it has to be simple. Um, and but there's things that you got to do. There's best practices, and most of the time, if a company puts the right tools in place and the right messaging in place for a salesperson, and they listen and go execute,
Yeah.
they're going to have success. The problem is when the company doesn't have that, right? And
Fair.
they think, and I see this a lot. They think salespeople know how to create the copy. They think salespeople know how to convert the business vision to a message that the buyer will. Oh yeah, that's a good idea, and they think these things, and it's a myth, right? We're salespeople. Give us the words. Give me
Yeah.
the notes. I'll go play the instrument, right? But give me the notes I need to hit. Give me the target. Point me in the right direction, and then get out of the way. But we don't do enough, and it's not product knowledge. I can go sell stuff without really understanding the nuts and bolts of the product.
Yeah.
It's really like, what am I doing for the buyer? Where's his problems? Where's her problems? What does she care about? What does he need to achieve? What did he need to get to? Um, and it goes back to what you started off by saying. It's a lot about what we believe, and having those right disciplines to get ourselves in the right frame of mind to go do the work, because the work is tough. You know, a batting average of 40% is
Amazing.
pretty good in sales. It'll earn you
Yeah.
millions and millions of dollars in baseball,
Yeah.
right? But in most places, you can't get it wrong. Meteorology, I guess they can be wrong a lot more than anybody else, right? Be the weatherman or the weather lady, they're
Yeah.
wrong more often than not. Um,
I think they predict rain just because they want to go golfing.
yeah, it's unbelievable how inaccurate it is. Like, we're supposed to have an inch and a half of snow today, right?
Yep.
I'm waiting. Um,
I've got some coming here, so.
well, where you live, it would be unusual if you didn't get some every week. So, no offense. But all right, so let's talk a little bit about. We got salespeople out there. We got entrepreneurs. We got business owners. We got leaders. What can they do to up their game? With outreach and leverage their knowledge and their intellectual property with podcasts and networking. You drive where we go, but you know what kind of tips can we give them? Because we're talking to them about fixing their mind, start their day off right. Let's say they start doing that and they get their act together. They got the right attitude. How do they go create the right network?
Yeah. Um, Podcasting is the case study of the year, but you never have to start a podcast. I like to talk about something I call the CAN system. We could do an hour and a half just on this. I'll give you the short version. The CAN system, CAN, create and network, content and networking, collaborate and network, community and network. Lots of C's. The key here, though, is you don't go networking just to hand out business cards. You don't go networking just to figure out who you can try to sell. You go networking to see who you can create content, collaborate, community, and network with. And how do you do that? To me, you want to create something that wouldn't exist without you and everyone else involved. Why do you want to create something unique, something different? Because then you become the center of gravity. People come
Mm.
to you because you're a trusted, well connected leader. So, a podcast is a great case study for this because you start a podcast. Ben, as an example, me, I didn't have any connections when I started my business. So I started a podcast. I literally called it Rochester. I'm from Rochester, New York, very snowy here. Now it's called Real Business Connections. On day one, it was called Rochester Business Connections because I needed some. And I didn't realize how clearly, like, this is smart. I didn't know exactly what I was doing. A lot of it was intuitive. I wanted to learn, but I was creating content and networking. So I would bring a CEO to the table, someone who would never give me time. Now, granted, it was a pandemic. They could call in on Zoom in their pajama pants, but these men and women that would never spend any time with me were willing to chat with me because I had a platform.
Yeah.
I had something Rochester, New York business podcast. So I was able to create and collaborate while I networked with these people. And I was able to build a network this way. Now, podcasting is a lot of work. You could just do a live stream, you could do an Instagram live, you could do freaking. I was gonna say TikTok. I don't know if you can do TikToks. I don't know. I don't know if your listeners do TikTok. But my whole
You can
point
do
is
LinkedIn Live.
you could do a LinkedIn Live using StreamYard like we're using today, but you also might start a blog. And maybe in your blog, let's say it's a blog for roofers. You're a roofing and solar salesman. You start roofers in Rochester. You create a blog all about the best roofing practices. You reach out to industry leaders, people, let's say you're doing solar, they do roofing, they don't do solar. You're going to reach out to all the roofers saying, hey, I'd love a quote or a piece of insight so I can feature you on my next blog post. And then every blog post you put out, you outsource the information to experts. I'm a solar guy, you're a roofer. You give me a quote. We build a relationship. I feature you. Now, when one of your clients with a fresh new roof might possibly want solar, you've got a relationship with me. But a lot of people are calling up the roofers saying, I'm a solar guy. You're a roofer. Let's partner. And you catch someone at the right time, it might work. But if you can create ways, unique ways to creatively create something with someone like this blog, the opportunity's endless. If I'm a visual person, like a graphic designer, I'm doing quotes. I'm doing quote graphics of like different podcasters. And I'm like, I want to work with this podcaster. Let's do some graphics for free, build a portfolio. If I'm a photographer, I'm going to places, I'm taking pictures and I'm having the discussion beforehand. Hey, I'd love to take these pictures and donate my time. I love what you do. Would you be open to promoting my services in exchange for that? So you're finding creative ways to collaborate with people. So when I show up to networking events, when I think about building my network and lead generation, I'm not thinking about how can I just sell everybody. I'm thinking about how can I connect with other leaders in my industry, share audiences, build a relationship, and then that person who I've never sold to becomes my number one referral partner. So create and network. Don't just show up with business cards, show up with a plan and invite people to be a part of it. And again, some people don't do this in sales. That's fine. But what happens when you have all these relationships? You're at a company you don't like, you get let go, or you want to go entrepreneurial. All those relationships, all that goodwill, that personal brand goes with you.
Yep.
People want to poach you. Like if you do this, especially in an AI economy where everybody's looking at technology, if you have strong relationships like this, you'll be in business for life, guaranteed.
I mean, you're literally building a network, right? You're building a community not based on give me something. You're building a network on mutual support and sharing your intellectual property, sharing what you know, and giving people a platform to share what they know, and it has this sort of ripple effect. And it, you used a bunch of examples there, um, and you can use like one of your interests to further your business practices. So I know a guy who's a financial advisor, really good at what he does, doesn't like prospecting because it's not fun to call people about their money. So he took his photography skill
Mm,
set and would go to his kids played sports. So he was out there taking pictures of his kids.
yeah,
And then he realized he got pictures of
yeah,
other people's kids. And he would like, hey, I got this picture of your kid. You want this? Would this would be some interest to you? So he started doing it on purpose, getting photos of other people's kids in an action shot or something like really
yeah,
cool, and then giving it to the folks. And then he built a relationship there with, and he given them value without asking them for anything, and he got to know them. So they would come out and say, "Hey, my kid's starting today. Can you get a shot of him?" Yeah, yeah, sure, right. And they would, and then
wow,
that would turn into business over time for him. But he felt good about what he was doing because he was, the kid was happy they got a shot. Mom and dad were happy because they got this cool image of their kid and was professional, better than they could do.
yeah.
That's kind of what you're talking about,
The
is
best
adding some
example
value.
I've like, it's the best example you could ever share because what's it have to do with finance? Nothing.
Upkiss, nothing. It's about
But it's
people.
when I go, Walter, you really seem like you got a good head on your shoulders. What do you do? Well, yeah, I do photography on the side, but I'm really passionate about finance. I get to serve my clients doing X, Y, and Z. Suddenly, you're not pitching anybody.
Right, you're just answering questions.
Exactly.
Yeah, and it's a flip, but it really speaks to what you're talking about doing, and you can do it with your business, right? It doesn't have to be a side deal. You can actually add value to people and offer your services to people, or an element of your services to people that maybe tangentially can get you to your real center of influence. Um, it's just thinking a little bit outside the box, and podcasting fits into that model. You still have to do it with intent, though, right? You still have to have that sort of a plan. You can't just wing it and hope for the best.
I mean, you can wing it and hope for the best. And we talked about science. You'll learn better ways to do it as you go. Because your first episode's going to stink anyways. You have
First
to
10
develop a little bit
episodes.
of skills. 10 episodes for me, like first 100, I feel like stink. But for me, I chose a topic I was really interested in learning about. I chose business. Now, I just happened to have a marketing company and I just happened to be able to display my marketing by promoting my podcast. But I started the podcast to learn about business. It's really that simple. And as I learn and I asked insightful questions, I built relationships with mentors that would teach me about business, made me better at business. Now, not every one of them became clients, but some of them did.
Sure.
But I was able to build my business just by starting something that I knew nothing about, and that's business. Business podcast, know nothing about it. You
It's
don't need
it's
to be
a
perfect.
You don't, and it's where you go back to the risk and that mindset of I'm gonna try this, but you do need to be able to have a plan. So you need, so that you know if you're going off track or if you're on track, right? And then you need to be able to think, is this working, and am I learning? Um, I mean, I started this podcast for like the dumbest reason, but I've sort of that's sort of kind of morphed into something where I want to add value to a group of people, entrepreneurs who are looking to improve, they're looking to scale. And I don't have personal relationships with these people, but I have a relationship. And
Mm,
I want to help sales managers and salespeople get better. So they get those ideas. There's that comes out of here. So I'm helping the audience. I want to be able to help a guest be able to tell their story, right? And I want to learn and have fun. Those are like the three criteria of an episode. Um, and sometimes I nail it, and sometimes I don't. Sometimes I make mistakes with a guest that didn't really stay on track. But
Mm,
like a lot of times, I have what we have here. We've added a bunch of value to getting an entrepreneur or salespeople to think differently about how they approach networking, how they approach their morning, how they approach the idea of discipline and mindset. And these are all threads that they really should be thinking about, especially this time of year. We're recording this at the end of December, but
yeah.
that the Q4 and Q1, those are the times we really should be, making the changes that we need to make. So, I'm going to pivot off of that. What we're going to have all your info in the show notes, but where
Beautiful.
do you want to direct people to learn more about Ben, more about your podcast, more about your business? Where should they go to
Let's
engage?
make it super, super simple. So, real business connections. If you don't know how to spell those words, I'm sure Google auto corrected for you. Type in real business connections wherever you found this, or Google it. You'll
Or
find
click
a
in the show
podcast,
notes. It'll be in the
or
show notes.
that's all you got to do. You'll find me. Make sure you subscribe and hit 5 stars on this one first, though. You're on YouTube, hit the thumbs up button. You'd be surprised how those tiny little things, if you're enjoying this podcast, take the 20 seconds to allow other people to enjoy it. The tiniest little hitting the thumbs up or 5 stars is badass. And if you do that, then you have permission to Google Real Business Connections and find me, or it
No,
sounds like it's in the show notes.
that's really nice of you. And I do a shitty job of getting asking people to do the thumbs up and the stars. Um, but
Smash that like button.
yeah, there you go.
Some people say it in their first sentence, and it's just nauseating to me. Add value first, and if it is valuable, you would hope people would show some reciprocation.
Yeah. And I think if most people are good with reciprocity, they just sometimes have to be reminded. And
Nothing wrong.
you just did that. There's nothing wrong with that. So I
Yeah.
appreciate it. So last question, Ben, past or present, any relationship with cigars?
I don't know if you want me to answer this one,
I do.
but I'm allowed to answer it because it's New York in the 2020s. I've never been a big cigar smoker. But I would purchase a Game cigar. I don't even know if that's a popular brand, but it was a Game green leaf cigar. I'd purchase one every single weekend. I'd take the leaf off of it, put the leaf on a Coke can to keep it nice and wet, cut the cigar down the middle, pour out the tobacco, put some weed in a grinder, grind that baby up, put it back in the cigar, roll it back up, and then I'd smoke the cigar. That was basically my entire teenage years, my friend.
And you got away with that because of the look and the smell. It hit it. Like how did that work logistically? I understand what you did and I understand why you did it, and it makes perfect sense. But how
Yeah.
did that really help cover it?
I mean, no. Febreze, eye drops, Febreze.
Hmm.
And this is a whole nother conversation. But being very experimental at a young age actually allowed me to do better in sales because I wasn't closed minded. I was just an open minded hippie kind of guy. So when I got into sales, I never prejudged people.
Hmm.
I was just like, hey, let's hang out and see if I can help you.
Right.
And I'm not encouraging it, but it lended well for me.
Well, but everybody has a style, right?
Sure.
And your quote unquote cigar experience, um, you know, helped you develop a style of being open, trying to have conversations, and sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. Um, there's it's a style, and I like the idea. I use the analogy of you know jazz music. I'm going to give you sheet music.
Hmm.
It's not a script. Scripts are one-sided deals for salespeople, right? Because we don't give the buyer a script. Say you got to say this, right? So that's why
It never
scripts
goes. Yeah.
are trouble. But we want to have a conversation. So if we give them the notes to play, your instrument is going to sound different than mine, even if we play the same notes, because it's going to carry our own personality, our own style. So I think that's the beautiful part of sales, is that we can be authentic and be who we are. And then the sales manager or the sales leader is like, you got to do it this way. Maybe you're not in the right spot, right? I mean, there's things that you need to do to be successful in an organization that are fundamental. Okay. But in terms
Hmm.
of how you interact with people, you could be successful 100 different ways. And that's what you're really saying there. Whether you have a rec card or a medical, you got rec cards and medical cards in New York,
Yeah.
both. Yeah.
By now it's recreational. I don't even smoke weed anymore, but it's recreational now. You don't need a medicinal license or anything. But the moment they made it legal, I got bored of it anyways. So
Lost its charm.
I guess so. I guess so.
I never found it appealing.
Fair enough.
And I mean, I'll drink brown. Bourbon is my thing. Um,
Mm.
and do they have the same effect on people? Similar, right? It, so should one be legal or not? Why not? Right? I mean, they're kind of doing the same thing. Should we behave properly when we do both? Yeah. Shouldn't get behind a wheel of a car. Um, but
Yeah.
I mean, not that we need to get political, but my rights stop at your nose, and your rights stop at my nose. And as long as we're not treating people the right way, I think pretty much anything should go. Um,
I
and I
couldn't agree more. And in a sales context, I've drank a lot of bourbon in my time. If you need a glass of bourbon before every single sales conversation, that's a problem.
That's a problem.
It
Yeah.
all depends on a relationship with the thing, and if it's not harming yourself or others, hey, I'm cool with it.
I went on a trip with a couple of buddies in my early 30s. We played tennis together, so we went to the U.S. Open in New York, um, and we had a really good time. We drank a lot of whiskey, and the one guy that was with us he never drank, and he was a vegetarian.
Hmm.
So the other guy and me were whiskey drinkers and steak eaters. So I don't know how he survived the 4 or 5 days with us, but at the end of we were leaving the airport, and he's like, and he was a psychologist.
Hmm.
So he's like, you guys, we asked him if he thought we had a problem. He's like, you don't have a problem if you can get up in the morning and do what you intended to do.
Hmm.
And then he looked at each of us and said, I'll see you on Tuesdays at 4 o'clock, and I'll see you on Wednesdays at 4 o'clock. Right. So that was his answer. We had problems. But we never missed a match. We always got things done, and we were on vacation. So,
Yeah.
but you're right. If you need the bourbon to make the call, or you need the weed to make the call, then you probably should be a little bit more introspective. So, um, this was as much.
You got to start a podcast called Bourbon Sales and Bourbon.
It's been considered.
Yeah.
It's been considered. Um, I appreciate the encouragement, and
Yes,
this
sir.
was as much fun as I was anticipating. Thank you. I mean, we could probably have you back on and go down 6 or 7 more rabbit holes. So I
That's
love
why
it.
you need sales and bourbon. We could sit down and talk about this all day.
Yeah, you got a
Yeah.
bourbon that you really passionate about?
My cheap go to is always Jim Beam. Always
Okay.
my cheap go-to. I like Knobs Creek. I like Bullet. Um, a lot of the times I would just pick something I had never had before. Woodford. Um, Jim Beam was always my cheap go-to for parties and things like
Sure.
that. But
You're not going to pull out Woodford Double Oak to bring to a party with a bunch of knuckleheads, right?
exactly,
Um,
exactly.
but it's how it starts, man. Like I have 100 bottles of bourbon in my cabinet,
Well,
and I don't need 100 bottles of bourbon. Some of them are 15 years old because I don't like drinking alone.
hmm.
So, yeah, we should have a conversation around that at some point. So, Ben, thank you. Um, we make sure we you folks click on Real Business Connections and send shovels to Ben in Rochester. He always needs a shovel.
Thanks, Walter. We'll talk soon.
Appreciate it. Hi, thanks for taking the time to listen and watch Sales and Cigars. Please don't forget to go hit the subscribe button and tell your friends about this. We've been doing this for a while, and I'm trying to grow the audience. And the goal of this whole podcast is to provide value to you, the listener, the audience, the business owner, the entrepreneur. We want to help out the guests and give them some exposure, and I want to have some fun and learn. And that's what I've been doing for the last few years. So please subscribe, tell your friends. If you've got ideas, please ping me, share those with me. If you're interested in being a guest, reach out. Thanks.